The Toyota Corolla Cross gets a refresh for the 2026 model year, and in this video I'll cover the exterior changes, the interior changes, take it for a drive and see what it's like out on the road, as well as talking about the kind of fuel economy you can expect, and also the pricing and how it compares to the competition these days. And so as far as the 2026 Corolla Cross, well, this is the hybrid version that we have here, and for 2026 there's greater differentiation between the hybrid and the non-hybrid Corolla Cross, which is still available, and the primary change is up front here. So for these hybrid versions, they're available in S, SE, and XSE trim versus the trims you get in the regular non-hybrid one, where you get L, LE, and XLE, so a little bit more luxurious. But if you look at the front end, it's more rugged for the non-hybrid version versus the hybrid is a little more streamlined, kind of borrows a grille that's similar to what you see on the other Toyota hybrids these days. And you also have some new headlights here that are darker for 2026. And here in the XSE version, they're even a little bit sharper here and have the extra LED elements, so a little bit more high-tech than the lower trims there. And you know, great look up front for both of them. It comes down to just, you know, what kind of preference you want, but it would be nice to see a rugged look for the hybrid as well, but I'm sure that would complicate things a little too much. You know, still a really nice look for both of these up front. I also like that it's now available in this cavalry blue color, and it's one of my favorite colors that's out there. There's a lot of companies doing a similar shade, but I really like Toyota's version on it, and especially paired with this black roof you can get as an extra cost option. It really does pop, also combined with these black wheels that you have here, which are also exclusive to the XSE trim, but you will get some really nice looking wheels even on the lower trims as well. Now out back, you have some very slightly tweaked taillights. Honestly, if they didn't tell me, I would have thought they were the same. It looks very similar to the old taillights. Again, minor tweaks to the rear bumper there, but overall, you know, basically the same out back. It's really up front where you get, you know, the larger change, I'd say. And, you know, still a very nice look though. It has a more traditional SUV shape compared to its only competitor, the new Subaru Crosstrek Hybrid. But, you know, this is nice and boxy and upright, and I think it still looks great. It looked great already, so there wasn't really any need for change, but this just freshens it up a little bit here for 2026. The interior of the 2026 Corolla Cross is a really nice improvement over the prior pre-refresh, and this is where you get the biggest changes for 2026. So anyway, first thing, sitting down in these seats. The seats are unchanged, and still great seats though. We have in the XSE here the combination of the leatherette with the fabric, which is kind of nice because it feels nice and grippy and holds you in place, but it actually breathes better than some of the microfibers and others like that. So I actually really like this seat. It's also a heated seat here, as standard in the XSE. You can also get a cold weather pack in the SE to option on heated seats here, and they have power adjustments here. No memory seats or anything, but you know, nice to have a power lumbar, and just a really nice seat. Moving on to the steering wheel here, that's also unchanged for 2026, but still a great wheel. It's the typical Toyota wheel we've seen, and basically everything else here. Has a great 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches, a decent amount of buttons here on it, but not too bad, very logically arranged. And it's a heated steering wheel, again, as standard in the XSE. And if you go for the cold weather pack in the SE, you'll get a heated steering wheel there as well, which is nice that you don't have to go up to a top trim to get a heated wheel. Toyota's really good about that, and so I just really love that we have that. Now the heated wheel, it doesn't get hot all the way through. It kind of stops where you see these stitch lines here. It does get a little warmer down towards the bottom here too, but just the top of the wheel, I was gripping it, I'm like, oh, that's cold. So it doesn't heat evenly, but you know, the main stuff, especially down by your 9-3 grip, it gets nice and toasty, and a really great heated steering wheel there, which also, by the way, is a physical button. So if you want to just have it toasty all winter, you can just leave that button pressed in, and then you don't have to constantly be hitting it, which is also very nice. Moving on to the gauge cluster here, that's one of the areas where we do see an improvement for 2026. So here in the XSE, we have the 12.3-inch digital gauge cluster for the first time, and we see this in other Toyotas, but it's a really nice gauge cluster. I love the customization you have. Not only can you customize the pods on the left, in the middle, and on the right, but you can also go in and change the look of the gauges, so you have a few different themes to pick from there, and you also even have the ability to just have one pod or no pods. If you want to have less information, you can do that as well, and so you can have it as busy and info packed or as simple as you'd like. And I love that flexibility, that customization. I wish that more car companies would follow this and, you know, just offer that stuff. It's not like it costs them that much extra money, if any at all, to add those, you know, customizations in, and it just really helps to personalize this vehicle. Now, if you don't go for the XSE here, all the lower trims, aside from the XLE and the non-hybrids, but any of the lower trims there are just going to get the 7-inch gauge cluster instead, which is still fine, just has little analog portions on the right and on the left. You know, not a big deal, not a must-have for these digital gauges, but, you know, certainly a nice upgrade here to help this feel a little more high-tech for 2026. Now, coming over to the middle of the dashboard here, another big improvement to help this feel more modern is this 10.5-inch touchscreen that you have. That is also standard here in the XSE and the XLE. It's an option package in the SE for only like $610 just to give you the bigger screen. The base screen is going to be an 8-inch touchscreen in the lower trims. That's also perfectly sufficient, but you know, with the trend of bigger screens, it's nice that they're offering this here. The only downside of this screen, aside from the fact that, you know, I mean, it's pretty simple. I actually really like it though. I mean, wireless CarPlay connected flawlessly here. That's, you know, just really nice and high resolution. Does have, you know, just your basic radio controls. Very nice and easy. I'm glad we still have satellite radio, and you know, just a really nice system. But the one thing I don't love is that there's no volume knob here. We just have volume up and down buttons and a power button in the middle, which, I mean, is better than nothing at all, or an on-screen control. So I'm glad we have a button, but you know, it seems odd that 3 buttons were a better choice than just a single knob that does what those 3 buttons do. But that's the way they decided to play it, and it is what it is. But, you know, you do also have buttons here on the steering wheel to, you know, change the volume, and that's also where you'll skip tracks if you don't want to be poking at the screen to do that. And then coming down, you have the same climate control area as before, so that is unchanged. This whole top dash area really is unchanged, but, you know, still really nice with the metal little trim and buttons. I think it's actually nicer than a lot of the others in this segment. Now, coming down, that's where you have this huge change, where you have this whole center area is completely new and really nicely improved. So right in the top part here, you will see you have a new Qi wireless charging pad here. And I'm very happy to report that this is the first Toyota I've seen where they have incorporated an improved wireless charging pad. Their other one and everything else they have currently on the market, it's just smooth. There's no brackets. It just does not hold your phone in place whatsoever. This is so much better. There's grooves to it. Now it's not quite as rubbery as I'd like. It's still plasticky. This should be grippier, but the big redeeming quality is that we have this little indent, so it actually drops down a little further up here. And so if you, especially if you're caseless like I am, that actually will hook into the camera notch on your phone if you have a phone that has a camera notch, and kind of hold it in place better there. And now we also have brackets. So brackets combined with the camera notch holder there makes this do a lot more reliable wireless charging. Now, it still isn't perfect, but it's massively improved, a huge improvement. I just would like to see this surface be rubberized, and then it would be pretty much ideal in my opinion. And so, but I'm glad that we have an improvement. That's great to see they're listening to feedback and making improvements, and I love that. So that's great. Now you also have just a few basic buttons here behind it, and also a new shifter, which I believe is out of the RAV4. It's a very similar one to this one we see in the current generation RAV4, but it's a little bit of a beefier kind of shifter, and feels a little more crossover-like than the previous shifter you had before. We also see a USB-C jack right there, and also some cup holders that I think are a little bit larger, but just a nice design there for those as well. You have the same center armrest, I believe, as before, and it's fine. There's some padding to it, but it gets pretty hard. The padding's kind of thin, so I wish that was a little plusher. But anyway, you open that up and you'll see a pretty small little center cubby. Yeah, that's one area I wish they would have improved a little bit here, because, you know, you can fit just barely like a pair of sunglasses and, you know, a couple other things, but that's about it. You also will see a USB-C jack and a regular power outlet in there. But nice to have nonetheless. And you also have pretty nice sized pockets here in the doors as well, with a bottle holder built in. Also, while we're looking down at the speaker area here, the last thing to mention up front here is the JBL stereo that this has. So it's a 9-speaker stereo system here, and it is an upgrade. It's about $800 extra even on an XSE. So XSE doesn't come fully loaded. You still got to pay extra for the JBL stereo, and I believe it gives you 1 or 2 other things too. But you know, so it's a nice sounding stereo. It's not going to wow you though. I think that the regular stereo probably will be fine. I'd have to listen to them back to back to truly say 100%, but a nice option to have an upgraded stereo if you want there. But I think most bass stereos in cars these days are pretty decent, so I don't think you need to have a giant amount of pressure to upgrade the stereo there. You also do have a moonroof here and these top trims as well, which is great, and I believe it's also an option in the SE. Now moving on to the back seat here in the Corolla Cross, it's actually really nicely done. So I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I have about an inch or two of legroom to spare. Certainly not the largest in this segment. There's plenty that do have good bit more backseat space. Chevy Trax in particular is huge back there. But the primary competitor, again, if we're talking hybrids, is the Subaru Crosstrek, which I'd say is pretty comparable as far as its backseat space. This seems a little taller though, so I think I might have a little bit more headroom there compared to the Crosstrek, but they're, again, very close, I'd say. And when you look forward, you'll see that they do have their own air vents, which is a nice touch, as well as 2 more USB-C jacks. There's also a fold-down center armrest with cup holders built into it, and also bottle holders there in the doors, but no other pocket back there. Now moving on to the cargo space here in the Corolla Cross, that's pretty nice too. It's nice tall space and nice and wide, very crossover like as you'd want, and little pockets there on the right and on the left. And the interesting thing though is beneath the floor it looks like you almost have room for a spare tire. There is a little bit of electronic componentry under there, but I wonder if there was a way they could have engineered that positioning of that part so you could have had a spare, because it seems like they're so close to being able to have a spare back there, but I'm guessing that slightly gets in the way. But that's a lot better than the Subaru Crosstrek Hybrid, where that has basically no space under the floor. So this does have some space. You could maybe try and put a couple tiny little things under the foam there. I don't know, but a good amount of space for something like this. And of course, if you don't go for the hybrid, you would, I believe, get some extra space under the floor there. But let's start up and go for a drive. The Corolla Cross just has the usual Toyota key. This one though is in a nice little leather pouch, which I think is a dealer option or accessory kind of thing. But just a couple of plastic buttons there, and a nice key then nonetheless, especially when it's wrapped in leather like this. But of course it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start here. I believe in all of these. I don't know if the keyless is standard, but I think push button start is. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the power button here. Because it's a hybrid, oftentimes it won't kick the gas engine on right away. All right, so setting off here in the 2026 Corolla Cross Hybrid. So the first thing you notice about it here, I think the first thing I notice is the really great visibility you have. You have a very upright kind of seating position here. Again, a little bit more crossover and SUV-like than Crosstrek. And so, I mean, you have a nice thin A-pillar here, great view out of the sides, nice large windows. View out of the back is also nice and clear. You also, especially with this big 10.5-inch touchscreen, you have a really clear rear view camera and really nice large display for that, which is great. Other things here, you'll hear the whole hybrid, warning system for pedestrians here under 25 miles per hour. And I'm really impressed with this hybrid powertrain. I've always loved it, and there's no changes for the powertrain here for 2026. So that's all the same. But what you'll notice though is that it's really a very usable hybrid system where if you are at some lower speeds, it does actually, have the juice to give you electric propulsion there for a short while before the gas engine kicks on. If you actually stay in the eco range or thereabouts on the power meter, you can drive this electrically a good bit of the time. And other things here, all the driver inputs are really nicely done. So you have really eager throttle response. I love that about it. It really does not delay whatsoever, and it's paired up to this eCVT kind of transmission, which doesn't have traditional gears like you'd like, but it gives you the power you need immediately with no waiting around for shifting or anything, and as a result it's just really enjoyable to use. Brakes also feel really good. I mean, Toyota's been doing hybrids basically longer than anybody else, and so they've really perfected all that kind of fine-tuning stuff, and so brakes feel totally normal even though they are regenerating and charging that battery there. It's really great that you have just such well done inputs for all that. Now I will say that steering is a little light. I'd like to see it maybe get a little bit heavier. There are the different drive modes here, so you can have a sport mode, which does give you a little bit of extra weight, but then that also puts the powertrain in a more aggressive state. So unfortunately there is no individual mode, so you can't have heavy steering and have everything else be normal. Maybe that could be something they could do in the future, but as it is, you know, still just really nice. And for a crossover, light steering's fine. I just felt that Crosstrek Hybrid just has a little bit of a more connected steering feel, and just feels a little bit better in my opinion. But other things here, you do have a little bit more road noise. That's one area where Corolla Cross kind of falls short of a lot of its competitors. It is one of the noisiest ones I've found of the bunch. And this motor, especially because it's so eager, it's very rev happy, which is great for response, but not great for the refinement, because it does get pretty loud, as you'll see in a minute here. And I have noticed that is something where it's noisier than Crosstrek Hybrid once again. That kind of was a little more sedated and subdued with the engine sounds and all that. This is going to be pretty loud. But let's turn down onto this back road here, and I'll show you what I mean. Let's see how it does. Here we go. So, I mean, immediate, but, you know, that's a lot of sound through the cabin. You don't usually get that much, and I think really anything else, honestly. But I do certainly prefer this hybrid powertrain over the non-hybrid Corolla Cross, where you only get 169 horsepower and just an engine that isn't super torquey. I think it's like 151 pound-feet. Versus this, the hybrid version of the Corolla Cross here, we're running a 2-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, and it does 196 horsepower here. It's a fair amount of punch. We have about a 7.2 seconds there to 60 time here, and it's going to be completely fine for something like this. And it is faster than the average run-of-the-mill crossover, which, you know, many of those typically do 8 to 9 seconds for 0 to 60, something like that. So this is going to feel a little faster, and I've just found, this is my second time living with a Corolla Cross Hybrid for a week. I did one a couple of years ago too. It's just so punchy, and again, I love the Toyota hybrid calibration, where, you know, you put your foot down and it's immediate, you know, go straight to giving you everything it's got, and just feels very willing and very eager. And that's something that we don't get a lot these days, especially with so many car companies trying to really hypermile and improve gas mileage. You know, a lot of them are hesitant to downshift, hesitant to, you know, give you an aggressive kind of throttle response. It's not overboard. It's very easy to drive this vehicle smoothly, but it just means, you know, if you're in a hurry or you're out of patience and you put your foot down, this is going to just feel more gratifying than many of the others that are going to frustrate you with their delayed responses. But other things here, so we're on this road that does generate a little bit more road noise, and, you know, you hear some here. Again, I think that Crosstrek Hybrid is probably a tiny bit quieter inside, but it's not a huge deal. And again, we're talking about subcompact crossovers, so, you know, most people don't have a super high bar for, you know, interior quietness and things like that, but just know Crosstrek, I think, is a little bit better in that regard as well. But we're coming up with some corners here that I always take, and let's see how the Corolla Cross handles them. So these weigh about 3,400 pounds, and that is one area where this has a nice perk over the Crosstrek Hybrid. These are about 200 to 250 pounds lighter, and as a result, this feels a little more agile in corners. Now, I think the trade-off is that Crosstrek Hybrid does have a more planted feel. It feels like it's got a lower center of gravity thanks to its boxer engine, and also it just being less of an upright crossover and, you know, more of a lifted wagon, honestly, lifted hatchback. And so, you know, but this handled it really well. I think, you know, because of the way that it's set up and the type of, you know, kind of setup they have for the Corolla Cross Hybrid here, it feels a little less stable. Like, I feel like I could probably take turns a little faster in a Crosstrek Hybrid, but this still is very good. And also, you know, with the XSE here, we have these bigger 18-inch wheels, just 225 wide tires, which is the same as Crosstrek, but, you know, I think the light steering also just really allows this to, like, kind of pitch in aggressively if you wanted to, which is great if you're in a, you know, enthusiastic kind of mood. But it's just, again, just feels a little more darty than Crosstrek, which I think has a little bit of a slower response, a little more deliberate, and gives it, you know, some more planted feel as a result. Some people might prefer one, some people might prefer the other. Definitely take them both for a test drive, see what you think and see what you prefer. Personally, I can appreciate both. I think, you know, though, if I was going to be on a windy back road for, you know, an hour or something, I'd probably rather be in the Crosstrek Hybrid, but again, this is still really nice. I love the Corolla Cross Hybrid. I've always enjoyed driving these things around. Again, the combination of having nearly 200 horsepower and a small little package like this that's responsive, that gets phenomenal fuel economy, far better than Crosstrek. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But, you know, it's just a really nice little thing to live with here, even with, you know, a little bit more road noise. Just such a nice driving vehicle. And the ride also, by the way, is pretty smooth. We do have a sportier suspension here for XSE, but, I mean, again, they understand it's a Corolla Cross. We're not talking about some GR product or something. So, you know, yes, it's a little bit sportier. Don't let that scare you off. This is still a very smooth ride, not firm in the slightest, really. But if, you know, you are worried and you want to go for, you know, one of the other trims, you'll get a slightly softer ride probably with the SE and the S with the bigger sidewalls of smaller wheels. Or again, you can just go for the non-hybrids if you really are worried about ride quality, and you know, those will give you a little bit of a softer suspension setup as well. The other important thing to note here is that the hybrid version comes standard with all-wheel drive. Now, in the regular non-hybrid Corolla Cross here, you're able to get it with front-wheel drive, but for the hybrids here, they're all-wheel drive. Now, the all-wheel drive system, that is another key differentiator between this and Crosstrek Hybrid. This uses a primarily front-wheel drive based system that has a little helper motor in the rear that does give you that all-wheel drive traction up to a certain speed, but it's fully electrically powered. Now, Toyota always ensures that the engine is putting out enough charging power to keep that rear motor going as long as it possibly needs to. So if you're climbing a long mountain at, you know, speeds under 20 miles an hour or something, you know, it's going to constantly keep that powered, but it's just not going to be as strong of a rear, you know, assistance, and it's not going to be a full 50-50 kind of power distribution like you have in the Crosstrek Hybrid, which that, you know, made the choice of giving you, you know, better all-wheel drive capability with a true drive shaft going to the rear to give you 50% of the power to the rear in those. So that'll be better in, you know, really challenging snow, mud, you know, really tough situations like that. And, you know, but the exchange is that it gets worse fuel economy by a wide margin by doing that. So it really comes down to, again, how much you're going to be doing really taxing stuff like that. I think, you know, for the average person that lives in the suburbs here, that sees a few inches of snow, maybe if you live in the snow belt on a bad day, I mean, this will be completely fine, totally sufficient. It's really, you know, the difference is going to be, you know, apparent for people that are, again, up in the mountains that really get heavy snow, where you're maybe going to see an advantage there. But don't let, you know, the marketing speak make you worried that, you know, if you don't have the Subaru, you're not going to be able to, you know, go anywhere in the snow. This has all-wheel drive. It does well in snow. I've driven this all-wheel drive system in other Toyota products in the snow. It does great still. So I just wanted to kind of clear the air on that little thing. But, you know, that is an improvement, though, for Crosstrek if that's something that's important to you. But now we're merging onto the highway here. I'll go ahead and pop it out of the sport mode and let everything calm down. There's also an eco mode, by the way, if you want to really try and hypermile. That'll just kind of dull some of those responses a little bit. But you know, I found that normal mode still allows you to get really phenomenal fuel economy still. You don't need to be in that eco mode to get, you know, really great fuel economy. But merging onto the highway here, I'm going to turn on the adaptive cruise control system, which, by the way, is standard here in all of these, and that's really nice, you know, to have. There are still some others where you got to pay a little bit extra, but most others have made adaptive cruise standard these days. But it also does have a lane keep assist, lane follow assist here. But while we're out here on the highway, the other thing to mention is you know, blind spot monitoring. That's something also that comes on SE and higher, but the base trim does not get blind spot monitoring. And that is a really nice thing to have. That also combines rear cross traffic alert. Something that's very nice to have. So for that reason, I'd skip the S and at least go for an SE. Otherwise, though, out here on the highway, it's a nice cruiser. You know, you do have some road noise here, but, you know, you turn on the radio or you have a conversation going, it's going to be fine. Now, you know, again, I think out here as well, it's going to be, again, one of the noisier ones, especially as far as just all subcompact crossovers in this segment. It is, you know, this especially is noisy here, but now, not so bad. We have a little bit of wind noise here as well, but, you know, totally fine in my opinion. And, yeah, we also have a gentle corner here coming up, so we'll kind of let it do most of the steering here. We do have cars right next to us, so I'm going to be very careful with how I babysit this, but I'm letting it, you know, do that steering assistance here. It's not a hands-off system or anything, obviously. You got to have your hands on the wheel, and it will nag you if it sees you don't have your hands on the wheel enough. But it handled that corner no problem here. And it does a really good job. Toyota has a very good lane keep assist system here. Fuel economy for the Corolla Cross Hybrid is rated at 46 mpg in the city, 39 on the highway, and 42 combined. And that is really, really good. The 46 mpg for the city rating is 10 mpg better than what the Crosstrek Hybrid will do. Now, when you're talking about the combined figure, though, this is only 6 mpg better because the Crosstrek Hybrid does the same for its combined figure of 36. But still, 6 mpg is significant, and especially if you're buying a hybrid, you're probably really focused on getting the best fuel economy possible. 6 mpg on its own is significant, but the fact that, again, this does so much better in the city, there's a clear advantage here to having this setup that Toyota has versus the physical drag of a drive shaft that Subaru has to deal with their choice to stick with that real all-wheel drive system. And in my driving here so far this week, I've been getting 42 mpg over about 50 or so miles of driving so far. I'm filming this earlier in the week. I will be doing a lot more driving here this week, so I'll put my final fuel economy estimate on the screen there, which I'm guessing will be even better. But even at 42, I'm hitting that combined figure, doing about combined driving, I'd say, for the most part. I'd say mostly suburban stuff, but a little bit of highway mixed in there. And even at 42, again, I'm very happy getting 6 mpg better than a best case scenario probably for the Crosstrek Hybrid. And 42 mpg was something that's almost 200 horsepower. It's a crossover. That's a very impressive amount of efficiency, and Toyota just does efficiency so well. The last thing to mention here, though, is pricing and how this compares to the competition. So let's get into that. So the Corolla Cross Hybrid here starts for the S trim at $30,445, including destination. Now you can go for a pretty loaded up SE, which again will give you like the heated seats, heated steering wheel, the bigger screen, and that's going to run you about $33,800, I believe. And that's really, I think, the sweet spot if you don't need to have the leather and cloth combo. I mean, just going for regular, just straight cloth all the way through, and still having a lot of these luxuries. Now, again, you don't have the wheels, you don't have the better headlights, you still give up some stuff, but it's a big jump for a fully loaded XSE, especially if you want the stereo and everything. This one, as tested, is over $37,000. And that, even though at that price, though, it's not really too bad, honestly. And if you're looking for the best price possible on a Corolla Cross Hybrid, or any vehicle for that matter, you're definitely going to want to head over to maranmotoring.com. There you'll go to the new car quotes page, and you'll be able to get access to dealer invoice pricing, as well as getting connected to a local dealer, so you can check one of these out for yourself and see what you think about the Corolla Cross Hybrid. So there's going to be a link in the description, as well as one in a pinned comment to take you straight to that site and get you all that info. But as far as how it compares to the competition, because we're talking about the hybrid here, I'm just going to talk about its only hybrid competitor, which is the Subaru Crosstrek Hybrid, like I've been mentioning very much here. And so that's why I compared it so much in this video, because it's really the only other one to cross-shop this with. You could make an argument that Dodge Hornet GT, it's a plug-in hybrid, but you have that one as well. Potentially, if you want to have actual real electric range, that's the only one really that does offer that, and that is very cool. But that's a lot more power, and that's usually a lot more money as well. Maybe there'll be some deals. Those are very nice vehicles as well. You just don't have the Japanese build quality of the Subaru or the Toyota. And I did have some glitches during my week with the non-plug-in hybrid version. But anyway, again, back to the Crosstrek Hybrid. So that's the new competitor here for 2026, brand new with the 2026 Crosstrek Hybrid, and that's a really nice option. But it's expensive. They start about $5,000 higher than this. So, I mean, that means that even a base Crosstrek Hybrid, which does come, pretty well equipped, but even that base sport trim, is going to be more expensive than a loaded SE, which, in my opinion, this has a better infotainment system. Even though it's a slightly smaller screen, this is hands down more responsive, easier to use. I like the setup a lot better. And whenever you're going for, again, that SE with all the stuff for almost $34,000. You know, that gives you heated steering wheel, the heated seats. Those are things you're not going to be getting in the sport trim of the Crosstrek there. So again, about 35 grand to start for Crosstrek Hybrid. Now, once you go to these top trims, if you are shopping for an XSE version of the Corolla Cross Hybrid, the Crosstrek Limited Hybrid, those are about $37,000 or so. So very comparable again to this, and they do go slightly higher with a package that if you want a moonroof, you could actually add on an extra package in the Limited, but that also gives you a 360 camera, which is unavailable here in this. So that's a nice thing to have, but those are $38,000. So a little bit more expensive, and again, you will be paying more for gas due to the lower fuel economy as well of Crosstrek Hybrid, and that's really the thing. Again, 36 mpg across the board for Crosstrek Hybrid. I haven't tested one yet around my own roads to see. It might do better in the real world, I'm not sure, but you know, that's what they're claiming, and that's just, again, a lot less than you'll get in this here. Now, the only other little perks, again, like I mentioned, the all-wheel drive system, which is a big perk if you live in a place that, you know, can use that, and also the fact you get 0.7 inches more ground clearance in Crosstrek. So again, if you are more outdoorsy, you're dealing with, you know, deep snow, or you're, you know, going off the beaten path a little bit more often, you know, that is going to be the area where, you know, the Crosstrek will have a little bit of an advantage. So at the end of the day, it'll come down to your personal preference and what your wants and needs are. I'm really happy that, you know, we have a competitor for the Corolla Cross, because this was really the only one in the segment for, you know, the past few years here. So I'm glad we now have the Subaru to compete, but I still think that this is probably, you know, my favorite, again, just because of the fuel economy. If you're, again, you're in a hybrid, you're wanting the best fuel economy possible, and this just crushes the Subaru in that regard. And again, that better infotainment, you know, just the way everything's done here, and also Toyota reliability. Subaru's pretty good, but not as good as Toyota in my opinion, and Toyota hybrids have been proven over, you know, several decades now to be very robust, very reliable, very well done. Toyota knows what they're doing very, very well, and I think that this would be the choice, especially if you're going for something where you're going to be owning it for, you know, a long time, high miles. This would definitely be the pick there as well. So anyway, but that's all of my thoughts here on the Corolla Cross Hybrid. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Toyota for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. Yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe to keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.